Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Hello. Um, Hi. I I I don't know if you guys were expecting me yesterday. My kids didn't have school, so it was a little bit more of a sleep in, and then I thought I was going to get to it like at 8, but then we were rushing around because I had some errands to run. And then I thought I was going to get to it afterwards, but then by the time we got home, then it was dinner, and then it was baths, and then it was bed, and then so yes, I didn't get to yesterday. Um, so today we're trying to figure out where we're going next. So I had asked for input. I didn't get any input. That's okay. That's okay. I prayed on it. I wasn't sure where I was going with it. Um, and so I had asked one of my pastors, and he had advised me um, to maybe get into Kings 2. He said that the best historical book, and I don't know because I asked him like what I should get into next that would kind of refer to or have something to do with like the Lenten season or the coming of the resurrection. Um, and he said the best chronological book would be not Kings 2, but Second Kings. And so I was gonna go that route, and then I opened up my Bible this morning to Second Kings and was kind of um, reading in on how to read Second Kings, and then I was kind of feeling like I don't think I should start Second Kings without reading, or yeah, without reading First Kings. So then I'm like, okay, and Second Kings isn't that long of a book; it's only 25 chapters, and then First Kings I think is even less than that. I think it was something like 22 chapters. And so even if we get to 2 chapters a day, that's only 11 days. I know I only do like 4 or 5 days a week, but I still feel like that will put us, like if I read First Kings and then read Second Kings, then that'll get us really close um, to Easter. But then I was thinking maybe I should do Psalms, and then I'm not forget it. Okay, so I'm gonna go to Kings. So we're gonna go to Kings. So we are gonna start in First Kings, and we are in. I'm gonna read out of the Message version. I was kind of going to read the introduction of Kings first, so maybe I'll read the introduction of Kings first, and then we'll get into the first chapter and or maybe even the second chapter. We will see how it goes. So, um, the introduction, I'm not going to read out of the Message version because I don't think that they even have it. I don't know when I look at my Message version online. So I'm going to read it out of my NIV Study Bible. Okay. The introduction says, "The man who had everything, the richest, wisest, most successful person of his time." Chapter 9, 6 through 7. "If you or your sons turn away from me and do not observe my commands and decrees, I have given you and go off and to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name." The first half of 1 Kings describes a man who got life handed to him on a silver platter. The son of King David and Queen Bathsheba, young Solomon grew up in the royal palace. Early on, he astounded others with his talent of songwriting and natural history. He composed 1,005 songs and spun off 3,000 proverbs, a sampling of which were collected in the biblical book of Proverbs. Solomon became king of Israel and received from God the special gift of wisdom. He was called the wisest man in the world, and kings and queens traveled hundreds of miles to meet him. They went away dazzled by the genius of Israel's king and by the prosperity of his nation. The best years ever. Israel reached its golden age under King Solomon, a time forever remembered with the nostalgia by Jews. Almost all the promised land lay in Israel's hands, and the nation was at peace. Literature and culture flourished. Of the people, simply that the Bible records simply that they ate, they drank, and they were happy. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones. Of all of Solomon's accomplishments, one stands out above all the others. He built the temple of God, the finest building in the world of that day. Almost 200,000 workers labored for 7 years to complete it. Despite the success of Solomon's reign, however, later in his life, the king had a dramatic downturn. His fall eventually brought the kingdom crashing down around him, and the second half of 1 Kings describes the grim process of discernment. What went wrong? How did it happen? How could the liveliest, wealthiest, most contented nation of its day slide so disastrously in one nation? As 1 Kings tells it, Solomon seemed unable to control his excesses. Reared in a palace, he loved luxury. When Israel launched its first maritime expeditions, he used them to gather such exotica as gold, ivory, apes, peacocks, and silver. He plated the floor of the temple with gold, wastefully gilded over fire, cedar, and precious ivory, and fashioned military useless shields out of gold. First Kings describes the 7-year construction of the temple in elaborate detail, but then it pointedly notes that the construction of Solomon's palace, twice the temple size, took 13 years. Solomon showed similar extravagance in his love life. First, he married the daughter of the Egyptian pharaoh, perhaps indicating that he was relying on military alliances, not on God, for the defense of his country. Then, disobeying God's specific orders, he married the princess of Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and other nations. 700 wives in all, and 300 concubines. The entire complexion of the court changed. It became un-Jewish, foreign. To please his wives, Solomon took a final, terrible step. He built altars to all their gods. The one who had built the Israelites' greatest monuments to God had fallen in worshiping idols. Rumbling of discontent in the land. To pay for the building project, Solomon instituted Israel's first national taxation system. He drafted workers for employment and kept them as virtual slaves. When bills mounted, he went so far as to cede certain northern towns in the Promised Land to another king. Resentment opened up between Israel's north and south, but the gulf separating Israel from God was even more dangerous. Previously, the people of Israel had looked to God as their leader. Now, however, the focus has shifted from God in heaven to the king in Jerusalem. Solomon had made himself the unofficial religious leader of the country, and when he slid badly, the nation soon followed. Solomon started out with every advantage of wealth, power, and wisdom. But 1 Kings gives the tragic conclusion: Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. Solomon seemed obsessed with a desire to outdo anyone who ever lived. Along the way, he failed to make God the center of his life. He achieved lasting fame in history, but excuse me. Sorry. But as a negative example, Jesus Christ himself rendered the final verdict on Solomon and his striving for glory when he pointed to the lily growing in the wild field. Not even Solomon, in all his splendor, he said, was dressed like one of these. I remember that. Now it's kind of like funny because it's like a jab at me. Okay. First and Second Kings were originally one book. The same Hebrew scroll contained both. Hebrew having no vowels in a very compact language. And when the book of Kings was translated into the wordier Greek and Latin, more space was needed. Translators arbitrarily split Kings. The 2 books, however, should be read as one. Well, there you go. I'm glad I'm reading the first one first. First King divides neatly almost in half. With most good news in the first half, it tells Israel's golden age, when King Solomon brought peace and prosperity to the nation. But he also sowed the seed of the calamities to follow. Chapter 12 marks the beginning of a civil war that ruptured into Israel into two nations, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. The rest of 1 and 2 Kings describes ruler by ruler the reign of 19 kings in the north and 19 kings and 1 queen in the south. Another book, 2nd Chronicles, covers the exact same historical period as 1 and 2 Kings. In some cases, 2nd Chronicles adds more detail. So if a story interests you, read the parallel account there. These books of history from the background for 17 other books of the Bible. The books of the prophets, famous prophets such as Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, and Amos, preached during the time of kings. Keeping 39 rulers straight can seem hopeless, especially since the books jump back and forth between the two countries. Remember, Israel was in the northern kingdom with its capital Samaria. Its kings were all unfaithful to God. Judah was in the southern kingdom with its capital Jerusalem. Almost half of its rulers remained somewhat faithful to God. The others proved disobedient. On pages 1396 and 14. Oh, sorry, you know, do my page numbers. You will find a lineup of all the rulers tracing the rise and fall of both northern and southern kingdoms. Use this handy reference as you read the history. You may find it helpful to underline various rulers' names using different colored markers, pens, for example. Okay. All right, so let's start in Kings 1. My Bible doesn't look like my chat is working. Not that any of you would be chatting, but on YouTube. It's weird. Oh, there it is. Oh, look it. Somebody is talking. Hi, Monica. Okay, let's get into Kings. Monica's never read Kings either. So, sounds good. Sounds like good historical books. And then who knows, maybe after this we'll get into Chronicles, like it says. All right. Here we go. Kings, 1 Kings chapter 1, and I'm reading out of the Message version. King David grew old. The years had caught up with him, even though they piled blankets on him. He couldn't keep warm. So his servant said to him, "We're going to get a young virgin for our master, the king, to be at his side to look after him. She'll get in bed with you and arouse our master, the king." So they searched the country of Israel for the most ravishing girl they could find. They found Abishag, the Shunammite, and brought her to the king. The girl was stunningly beautiful. She stayed at his side and looked after the king, but the king did not have sex with her. At this time, Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, puffed himself up, saying, "I'm the next king." He made quite a splash with chariots and riders and 50 men to run ahead of him. His father had spoiled him rotten as a child, never once reprimanding him. Besides that, he was a very good-looking and the next in line after Absalom. Adonijah talked with Joab, son of Zeruiah, and with Abiathar, the priest, and they threw their weight on his side. But neither of the priests, Zadok nor Benani, son of Jehoiada, nor Nathan the prophet, nor Shimei or Ray, nor David's personal bodyguards supported Adonijah. Next, Adonijah held a coronation feast, sacrificing sheep, cattle, and grain-fed heifers at the stone of Zoleth near the Rogel spring. He invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and everyone in Judah who had position and influence. But he did not invite the prophet Nathan, Benani, the bodyguards, or his brother Solomon. Nathan went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. "Do you know that Adonijah, Haggith's son, has taken over as king and our master? David doesn't know a thing about it. Quickly, now, let me tell you how you can save both your own life and Solomon's. Go immediately to King David. Speak up. Didn't you, my master, the king, promise me your son Solomon will be king after me and sit on my throne?" So why is Adonijah now king? While you're talking with the king, I'll come in and corroborate your story. Bathsheba went at once to the king in his palace bedroom. He was so old. Ab- Ab- Abishag was at his side, making him comfortable. As Bathsheba bowed low, honoring the king, he said, "What do you want?" "My master," she said, "you promised me in God's name your son Solomon will be king after me and sit on my throne. And now look what's happened. Adonijah has taken over as king, and my master, the king, doesn't even know it. He has thrown a huge coronation feast, cattle and grain-fed heifers and sheep, inviting all the king's sons, the priests, Abiathar and Joab, head of the army, but your servant Solomon was not invited. My master, the king, every eye in Israel is watching you to see what you'll do, to see who will sit on the throne of my master, the king, after him. If you fail to act the moment you're buried, my son Solomon and I are as good as dead." Abruptly, while she was telling the king all this, Nathan the prophet came in and was announced. "Nathan the prophet is here." He came before the king, honoring him and bowing deeply, his face touching the ground. "My master the king," Nathan began, "did you say Adonijah shall be king after me and sit on my throne? Because that's what's happening. He's thrown a huge coronation feast. Cattle, grain-fed heifers, sheep, inviting all the king's sons, the army's officers, and Abiathar's, the priest. They're having a grand time, eating and drinking and shouting, 'Long live King Adonijah!' But I wasn't invited, nor was the priest Zadok or Benani, son of Jediah, nor your servant Solomon. Is this something that my master the king has done behind our backs, not telling your servants who you intended to be king after you?" King David took action. "Get Bathsheba back in here." She entered and stood before the king. The king solemnly promised, "As God lives, the God who delivered me from every kind of trouble, I'll do exactly what I promised in God's name, the God of Israel. Your son, Solomon, will be king after me and take place on my throne, and I'll make sure it happens this very day." Bathsheba bowed her face low, her face into the ground, kneeling in reverence before the king. She said, "Oh, may my master, King David, live forever." King David said, "Call Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, and Benani son of Jehoiada." They came to the king. Then he ordered, "Gather my servants, then mount my son Solomon on my royal mule, and lead him in a procession down to Gion. When you get there, Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet will anoint him king of Israel. Then blow the ram's horn trumpet, the shout, 'Long live King Solomon.' You will then accompany him as he enters and takes his place on my throne, succeeding me as king. I have named him ruler over Israel and Judah." Benani, son of Jehoiada, Jehoiada, sorry, back to the king. "Yes, and may God, the God of my master, the king, confirm it. Just as God has been with my master, the king, may he also be with Solomon and make his rule even greater than that of my master, King David." Then Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benani, son of Jehoiada, and the king's personal bodyguard, the Keriths and Kerethites and Pelethites, went down Mountain Solomon on King David's mule and paraded him to Gion. Zadok the priest brought a flask of oil from the sanctuary and anointed Solomon. They blew the ram's horn trumpet, and everyone shouted, "Long live King Solomon." Everyone joined the fanfare. The band played, and the people singing, the very earth reverberating to the sound. Adonijah and his retinue of guests were just finishing their coronation feast when they heard it. When Joab heard the blast of the ram's horn trumpet, he said, "What's going on here? What's all this uproar?" Suddenly, in the midst of the questioning, Jonathan, son of Abiathar, the priest, showed up. Adonijah said, "Welcome, a brave and good man like you must have good news." But Jonathan answered, "Hardly. Our master King David has just made Solomon king, and the king has surrounded him with Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, with the Kerinthites and the Pelethites, and they've mounted Solomon on a royal mule. Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet have anointed him king at Gihon, and the parade is headed up this way singing a great fanfare. The city is beside itself. That's what you're hearing. Here's the crowning touch. Solomon is seated on the throne of the kingdom. And that's not all. The king's servant have come to give their blessing to our master King David, saying, God makes Solomon's name even more honored than yours, and make his ruler greater than yours. On his deathbed, the king worshipped God and prayed, Blessed be God, Israel's God, who has provided a successor to my throne, and I live to see it. Panicked, Adonijah guests got out of there, scattering every which way. But Adonijah himself, afraid for his life because Solomon, fled the sanctuary and grabbed the horns of the altar. Solomon was told, Adonijah, fearful of King Solomon, has taken sanctuary and seized the horns of the altar, and is saying, I'm not leaving until King Solomon promises that he won't kill me. Solomon then said, If he proves to be a man of honor, not a hair on his head will be hurt. But if there's evil in him, he'll die. Solomon summoned him, and they brought him from the altar. Adonijah came and bowed down, honoring King Solomon. Solomon dismissed him. Go home. Okay, we're going to keep reading here. Chapter 2. When David's time to die approached, he charged his son Solomon, saying, I am about to go the way of all the earth, but you, be strong. Show what you're made of. Do what God tells you. Walk in the paths he shows you. Follow the life map. Absolutely. Keep an eye out for the signposts. His course for life set out in the revelation to Moses. Then you'll get on well in whatever you do. And wherever you go. Then God will confirm what he promised me when he said, If your sons watch their step, staying true to me, heart and soul, you'll always have a successor on Israel's throne. And don't forget what Jacob, son of Zeruiah, did to the two commanders of Israel's army, to Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He murdered them in cold blood, acting in peacetime, as if he were at war, and he has been stained with blood ever since. Do what you think is best with him, but by no means let him get off scot-free. Make him pay. But be generous to the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite. Extend every hospitality to them. That's the way they treated me when I was running from my life, from Absalom, your brother. You also will have to deal with somebody's coming. Oh. You will have to deal with Shimei, son of Jerah, the Benjaminite, from Bahurim, the one who cursed me so viciously when I was on my way to Maham. Later, when he welcomed me back at the Jordan, I promised him under God, I won't put you to death, but neither should you treat him as if nothing ever happened. You're wise. You know how to handle these things. You'll know what to do. You'll know what to do to make him pay before he dies. Then David joined his ancestors. He was buried in the city of David. David ruled Israel for 40 years, 7 years in Hebron, and another 33 in Jerusalem. Solomon took over on the throne of his father David. He had a firm grip on the kingdom. I was just thinking it says that he was buried in the city of David, and that is Jerusalem, because that's where he ruled for the last 33 years in Jerusalem. And then that was where Jesus was from. All right, and he was born in Bethlehem, but his family was from Jerusalem. That's why they said he's from the city of David. Okay. Adonijah, son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. She said, "Do you come in peace?" He said, "In peace. And then may I say something to you?" "Go ahead," she said, "speak." "You know that I had the kingdom right in my hands, and everyone expected me to be king. And then the whole thing backfired, and the kingdom landed in my brother's lap. God's doing. So now I have one request to ask of you. Please don't refuse me." "Go ahead, ask," she said. So I guess that Adonijah was also one of David's sons. That's what I'm getting, since he had so many wives and so many concubines, that he must have also been an offspring, because he said he fell in my brother's lap. But I think that might actually be like true, like blood brother. "Go ahead, ask," she said. "Ask King Solomon. He won't turn you down to give me Abishag the Shemanite as my wife." "Certainly," said Bathsheba. "I'll speak to the king for you." Bathsheba went to King Solomon to present Adonijah's request. The king got up and welcomed her, bowing respectfully, and returned to his throne. Then he had a throne put in place for his mother, and she sat at his right hand. She said, "I have a small favor to ask of you. Don't refuse me." I wonder if Bathsheba was... No, because if Bathsheba was his mom also, then why would she be fighting for Solomon? The king replied, "Go ahead, mother. Of course, I won't refuse you." She said, "Give Ashahag the Shemanite to your brother Adonijah as his wife." King Solomon asked his mother, "What kind of favor is this, asking that Abishag, I'm sorry, these words are crazy, Shunammite, be given to Adonijah? Why don't you just ask me to hand over the whole kingdom to him on a platter, since he is my older brother and has Abiathar the priest and Joab, son of Zeruiah, on his side?" The king Solomon swore under God, may God do his worst to me if Adonijah doesn't pay for this with his life. As surely as God lives, the God who has set me firmly on this throne of my father David and put me in charge of the kingdom, just as he promised, Adonijah will die for this today. King Solomon dispatched Benani, son of Jehoiada. He struck Adonijah and he died. The king then told Abiathar the priest, "You're exiled to your place in Anathoth. You deserve death, but I'm not going to kill you, for now anyway, because you were in charge of the chest of our ruling God in the company of David my father, and because you shared all the hard times with my father." Solomon stripped Abiathar of his priesthood, fulfilling God's word at Shiloh regarding the family of Eli. When this news reached Joab, this Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah, although he had remained loyal in the Absalom affair, he took refuge in the sanctuary of God, seizing the horns of the altar and holding on for dear life. King Solomon was told that Joab had escaped to the sanctuary of God and was clinging to the altar. He immediately sent Benani, son of Jehoiada, with orders, "Kill him." Benani went out to the sanctuary of God and said, "King's orders, come out." He said, "No, I'll die right here." Benani went back to the king and reported. This was Joab's answer. The king said, "Go ahead then, do what he says. Kill him and bury him. Absolve me and my father's family of the guilt of Joab's senseless murders. God is avenging those bloody murders on Joab's head. 2 men he murdered, men better by far than he ever was. Behind my father's back, he brutally murdered Abner, son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of Judah's army. responsibility for their murders is forever fixed on Joab and his descendants. But for David and his descendants, his family, kingdom, the final verdict is God's peace. So Benani, son of Jehoiada, went back, struck Joab, and killed him. He was buried in his family's plot out in the desert. The king appointed Benani, son of Jehoiada, over the army in place of Joab, and replaced Abiathar with Zadok the priest. The king next called in Shimei and told him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but you are not to leave the area. If you so much as cross the brook Kidron, you're as good as dead. You have decreed your own death sentence." Shimei answered the king, "Okay, thank you. Your servant will do exactly as my master king says." Shimei lived in Jerusalem a long time, but it so happened that 3 years later, two of Shimei's slaves ran away to Achish, son of Micah, king of Gath. Shimei was told, "Your slaves are in Gath." Shimei sprang into action, saddled up his donkey, and went to Achish in Gath looking for his slaves, and then came back bringing his slaves. Solomon was told, "Shimei left Jerusalem for Gath, and now he's back." Solomon called for Shimei and said, "Didn't I make you promise me under God and give you a good warning besides that you would not leave this area? That if you left, you would have decreed your own death sentence? And didn't you say, 'Okay, thank you, I'll do exactly as you say'? So why didn't you keep your sacred promise and do what I ordered?" The king told Shimei, deep Then the king told Shimei, "Deep in your heart, you know all the evil that you did to my father David. God will now avenge the evil on you. But King Solomon will be blessed, and the rule of David will be a sure thing under God forever." The king then gave orders to Benani, son of Jehoiada. He went out and struck Shimei dead. The kingdom was now securely in Solomon's grasp. All right, that was good. Okay, this is an interesting story going on, so that's good. Keeping my attention. We are. I didn't even open in prayer. Oh my goodness gracious! All right, let's close in prayer. Dear God, thank you for giving us this time to get into your word today. Thank you that you have left these words for us, that we can learn more about you. Please help us to remain in your word daily, Lord, that we can stay strong in our faith with you and our walk with you, O Lord. Help us to remember that in everything we do, we live for you, O Lord. Help us to lean on you as our strength and our understanding. Let us turn to you in every aspect of our lives. I ask you this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I hope you enjoyed Kings, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Don't let anyone steal your joy.